At my grandson's christening, my daughter-in-law handed me back the quilt I'd sewn for the baby. She held it between two fingers like it was something she'd found in a dumpster. "We don't need homemade things, Dorothy." We registered at Pottery Barn. My son stood right there. He didn't say a word. His wife's mother, Vivian, laughed from the patio. "Sweetheart, she works at a dry cleaner. What did you expect, Cashmere?" I folded the quilt carefully, tucked it under my arm, and walked to my car. Nobody followed me. The next morning, I called my attorney. He answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Brennan, I was wondering when you'd call. The Hawthorne deal closed yesterday. You now own every commercial building on Maple Street." "Hey there, quick question before we continue. Have you ever made something with your own hands for someone you love and they treated it like garbage? Drop a comment. I read every single one. And hit subscribe if you want more stories like this one. Quick heads up, some details here are fictionalized for storytelling, but the lesson is completely real. Now, back to what happened after that phone call. The christening had been held at the Winslow Country Club in Ridgewood, Connecticut. My son Daniel had insisted on it. Or rather, his wife Jessica had insisted, and Daniel had agreed, the way Daniel agreed to everything Jessica wanted since the day they got engaged. 68 guests, a string quartet, imported champagne that cost more per bottle than I made in a day, pressing shirts at Harmon's Dry Cleaning on Oak Avenue. I'd been working at Harmon's for 22 years. Before that, I cleaned rooms at the Marriott for 9 years. Before that, I waitressed at a diner on Route 7 while raising Daniel alone after his father left us with an empty bank account and a leaking roof. I'd made the quilt over 4 months. Every night after my shift, I'd sit at my sewing machine in the back room of my apartment and work on it. Cotton fabric from the craft store on Elm Street, hand-stitched patterns I'd learned from my mother, who'd learned them from hers. Blues and whites and soft yellows, each square had a different design, stars, moons, little bears. I'd embroidered my grandson's name in the center, Oliver. My first grandchild. I'd wrapped it in tissue paper and tied it with a blue ribbon. When I handed it to Jessica at the christening, she barely looked at it. She unfolded one corner, saw the hand stitching, and her lip curled. That's when she said it. "We don't need homemade things, Dorothy." Daniel was standing 3 feet away. He saw my face. He saw the quilt dangling from his wife's fingers. He looked at the ground. Then he looked at his phone. That night, I sat in my apartment above Rosario's Pizza on 2nd Street. The rent was $600 a month. The place smelled like tomato sauce and old radiators. I'd lived there for 16 years, since Daniel left for college. 1 bedroom, a kitchen the size of a closet, a bathroom where the hot water took 4 minutes to arrive. I could have lived anywhere. I opened the fireproof safe I kept in the hall closet, behind my winter coats and a box of Daniel's childhood drawings. Inside were 73 property deeds, commercial buildings, apartment complexes, retail strips, and a waterfront warehouse I'd converted into loft spaces in 2016. Total portfolio value as of last quarter, $41 million. It started in 1991. I was 33, divorced, broke, raising a 7-year-old boy on tips from the Marriott. I'd been cleaning the penthouse suite when I overheard 2 businessmen discussing a foreclosed strip mall in Bridgeport, 14 units, going for $60,000 at auction. Everyone said Bridgeport was dead. Nobody was investing there. I emptied my savings, borrowed $3,000 from my sister, and bought it. I fixed what I could myself. Replaced ceiling tiles, painted walls, patched plumbing from YouTube videos before YouTube existed. From library books, I found tenants, a barbershop, a nail salon, a tax preparer, working people who needed affordable rent. They paid on time because I kept the buildings clean and fixed things fast. The income covered the mortgage. Then it covered the next property. Then the next. $300 here, $500 there. For 33 years. That's how you build a fortune nobody suspects. I never told Daniel. I wanted him to understand that work had value, that his mother pressing shirts for $11 an hour wasn't something to be ashamed of, that a woman who steamed wrinkles out of other people's suits could still be worth respecting. I thought if he didn't know about the money, he'd love me for who I was. I was wrong. The boy who used to help me fold laundry on Sunday mornings had become a man who couldn't look me in the eye while his wife insulted me. Daniel worked in pharmaceutical sales. Good salary, company car, expense account. But Jessica's tastes ran ahead of his paycheck. The country club membership, the house in Ridgewood with the 3-car garage, the vacations to Turks and Caicos, private school deposits for Oliver. And he was only 4 months old. I pulled out a folder from the safe labeled Winslow Country Club, purchase agreement dated 2020. I'd bought the club's building and its 12 surrounding acres through BGM Holdings, my company, when the previous owner defaulted on his loan during the pandemic. The country club leased the property from me. They didn't know who owned it. My property manager, Ruth Nakamura, handled everything. My son's christening party. In a building I owned. While his wife told me my quilt wasn't good enough. I closed the safe and went to bed. I didn't cry. I'd spent 33 years learning that tears didn't fix anything. Work did. The next morning, I called Ruth. Ruth Nakamura had managed my properties for 11 years. She was a former commercial real estate broker who'd burned out on corporate deals and wanted something quieter. She ran my entire portfolio from a small office on Water Street, and she was the only person in the world who knew the full scope of what I'd built. Dorothy. How was the christening? I need a background check on someone. Jessica's brother, Craig Alderman. He handles Daniel and Jessica's finances. Something about him doesn't sit right. Ruth was quiet for a moment. What kind of doesn't sit right? The kind where my son is living a lifestyle his salary can't support, and his brother-in-law is the one managing the money. I know someone. Angela Reeves, former forensic accountant with the SEC. She's private now. Very discreet. Set it up. 3 days later, I sat across from Angela Reeves at a small cafe on Greenwich Avenue. Angela was in her 50s. Short gray hair, no makeup, reading glasses on a chain. She ordered black coffee and pulled out a tablet. Ruth speaks highly of you, Mrs. Brennan. What do you need? My son-in-law's brother manages investment accounts for several families in Ridgewood. My son and his wife are among his clients. I need to know if the money is where it's supposed to be. Angela studied me. You think he's mismanaging funds? I think my son is spending money he doesn't have, and I want to know where it's coming from. Give me a week. It took her 5 days. She called on a Thursday evening. I was ironing a batch of dress shirts at Harmon's, the steam press hissing in rhythm. Mrs. Brennan, you were right to be concerned. Craig Alderman has been running a Ponzi scheme, small scale but growing. He's been taking investment money from 12 families, paying older investors with new money, and skimming roughly $480,000 into a personal account over the past 2 years. I set down the iron. My son. Is Daniel involved? Not directly. But Craig has been using your son's name on several account documents without his knowledge. If this collapses, and it will, Daniel could face legal exposure. He signed papers Craig put in front of him without reading them. The steam press hissed. A shirt hung from the rack, perfectly creased, waiting for a customer who'd never know whose hands had pressed it. How long before it collapses? One of the investors, a retired couple named the Hartfords, has been asking questions. Their quarterly returns don't match the market. Craig's been stalling them, but he can't stall forever. I'd say 2 to 3 months before someone contacts the SEC. Can you document everything? Every transaction, every forged signature, every dollar Craig skimmed? Already done. I have it in a secured file. Send it to me. Encrypted. I finished my shift at Harmon's that night, pressed 47 shirts, 12 blouses, and 6 suit jackets, clocked out at 9, walked home in the dark. The folder from Angela was waiting in my email. I sat at my kitchen table and read every page. My son's name appeared on documents he'd never understood. His signature on investment agreements that were essentially fraudulent. Craig Alderman had turned my son into an unwitting accomplice. Jessica knew. She had to know. Her brother was the one funding their lifestyle. The house, the club membership, the christening with 68 guests, and imported champagne. All of it built on stolen money from families who trusted Craig with their retirement savings. I could have called Daniel right then, told him everything, warned him to get a lawyer, to cut ties with Craig, to protect himself before the whole thing imploded. But he wouldn't believe me. He'd tell Jessica, And Jessica would tell Craig, and Craig would destroy the evidence and find new victims. And Daniel would look at me the way he'd looked at me at the christening, like I was someone to be managed, someone whose opinions didn't matter because she pressed shirts for a living. I needed Daniel to see the truth with his own eyes, and I needed to make sure he was protected when it all came apart. I picked up my phone and called Angela back. I need you to prepare a separate report. Everything showing Daniel had no knowledge of Craig's scheme. Every document proving he was used, not complicit. That's going to take some careful work. Take whatever time you need. But when this goes to the authorities, I want my son's name clean. Understood. I hung up and opened my laptop. I typed a message to the SEC tip line. Anonymous. Detailed. Every account number, every fraudulent transfer, every forged document Angela had uncovered. I attached the evidence and hit submit. Reference number SEC 202544781. Then I cleared the browser history, closed the laptop, and went to bed. Tomorrow I'd press more shirts. The day after that, I'd press more. And somewhere in a government office, someone would open my file and start asking questions. Daniel called 6 times over the next 2 weeks. I answered twice. The first time, he asked if I was upset about the christening. I told him I was fine. The second time, he asked if I wanted to come see Oliver on Sunday. I said I was working. Mom, you work too much. You're 66. You should be relaxing. I like working. Jessica says she's sorry about the quilt thing. She didn't mean it like that. How did she mean it? Silence. Then, she has certain standards. I understand, Daniel. Give Oliver a kiss for me. I hung up and went back to the pressing machine. Steam rose around me. Another shirt. Another crease. Another dollar I didn't need but earned anyway, because work wasn't about the money. It was about the discipline. 3 weeks after I submitted the SEC tip, Ruth called with news. Dorothy, the Winslow Country Club lease is up for renewal. They want a 5-year extension. Should I approve it? Not yet. I want to schedule a meeting there. A private event in the main dining room, 3 weeks from Saturday. 12 noon. What kind of event? A family lunch. I'm inviting Daniel, Jessica, Craig, and Vivian. Ruth paused. And I'd like you to be there, along with Angela Reeves and her documentation. Dorothy, what are you planning? The truth. I spent the next 3 weeks doing exactly what I'd done for 33 years. I went to work. I pressed shirts. I came home. I sat at my kitchen table and reviewed Angela's reports, now updated with SEC investigation confirmation. The federal agency had opened a formal inquiry into Craig Alderman's investment practices. They'd frozen certain accounts. Craig didn't know yet, but the walls were closing in. I also spent time on something else. The quilt. I'd taken it home from the christening, washed the wrinkles out, and hung it to dry on the line outside my bedroom window. It was beautiful. My mother's patterns, my hands, my grandson's name stitched in the center, Oliver. I folded it carefully and placed it in a box. It would wait. The Saturday arrived gray and cool. October in Connecticut. I drove to the Winslow Country Club in my 12-year-old Honda Civic. The valet looked at the car, then at me, then at the car again. I'm here for the Brennan lunch, main dining room. He took my keys like he was handling something fragile and unpleasant. The main dining room at Winslow was all dark wood and white tablecloths, oil paintings of fox hunts on the walls, the kind of room designed to make certain people feel important and other people feel invisible. I'd set the table for 7. Daniel and Jessica, Craig and his wife, Monica, Vivian, Ruth, and me. Daniel and Jessica arrived first. Jessica was in a cream dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Daniel wore a blazer and that expression he always wore around his wife's family. Careful. Performative. Mom. He kissed my cheek. This is nice. I didn't know you were a member here. I'm not. I made a special arrangement. Jessica scanned the room with approval. Well, this is lovely, Dorothy. What's the occasion? Family. Craig arrived next with Monica. He was 42, tall, confident, the kind of man who shook hands too hard and talked about the market like he personally controlled it. Vivian came last, trailing perfume and commentary. Dorothy, what a surprise! I didn't think this was your kind of place. It's more mine than you think. We sat. We ordered. Small talk floated across the table like smoke. Craig talked about a new fund he was launching. Jessica talked about Oliver's sleep schedule. Vivian talked about a cruise she was planning. Daniel talked to his phone. After the main course, I set down my fork. I invited everyone here because there's something I need to share. The table went quiet. Jessica's smile tightened. Craig reached for his water glass. This is about family, and it's about honesty. Two things I valued my entire life. Mom, what's going on? Daniel's voice was cautious. I looked at Craig. Craig, I'm going to give you a chance to tell the truth before someone else does. Craig's face didn't change, but his hand stopped halfway to the glass. I'm sorry? The investment accounts, the 12 families, the money you've been moving. The silence was immediate and total. Jessica's fork clattered against her plate. Vivian's mouth opened. Monica looked at her husband. I don't know what you're talking about, Dorothy. Craig's voice was steady, but his eyes were not. The dining room door opened. Ruth Nakamura walked in carrying a leather portfolio. Behind her, Angela Reeves. Behind Angela, a woman I'd spoken with twice on the phone, Claire Dawson, SEC Enforcement Division. Craig stood up so fast his chair scraped across the hardwood floor. What is this? This is the truth, I said. Angela placed the portfolio on the table and opened it. Bank statements, wire transfers, forged signatures, account records showing $480,000 diverted into Craig's personal accounts over 24 months. Craig, Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. What is she talking about? She's lying. She's a dry cleaner, for God's sake. She doesn't understand finance. I understand enough to know that the Hartford family's retirement savings isn't in their account anymore. I understand that the Morrison family's college fund has been paying for your boat slip in Stamford. I kept my voice level. And I understand that you've been using my son's name on documents he never read, putting him at legal risk for crimes he didn't commit. Daniel went white. What? Claire Dawson stepped forward. Mr. Alderman, I'm with the SEC Enforcement Division. We've been investigating your investment activities for the past 3 weeks based on evidence submitted to our office. I have questions I'd like you to answer voluntarily. If you prefer, we can do this at our field office. Craig looked around the room like a trapped animal. At Jessica, who was staring at the documents. At Vivian, whose face had gone gray. At Monica, who'd started crying silently. At Daniel, who was reading the pages with shaking hands. This is my signature, Daniel whispered. This is my name on these accounts. Craig, you told me these were standard partnership forms. They were. They are. Danny, listen to me. Don't call me Danny. Daniel's voice cracked. You put my name on fraudulent accounts. You've been stealing from people and you used me as cover. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Craig opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Jessica turned to me. Her face was a landscape of emotions, shock, anger, and something underneath that looked almost like shame. You did this. You called the SEC. I provided evidence of illegal activity that was putting my son at risk. You had no right. I had every right. He's my son. He's my husband's. And Craig is your brother. Which means you either knew what he was doing, or you chose not to ask where the money came from. Jessica flinched. The room was silent. Claire Dawson waited patiently by the door. Vivian stood up, her chair scraping. This is ridiculous. Dorothy, you're a woman who presses shirts. You have no business interfering in financial matters you can't possibly understand. I looked at Vivian for a long moment. Then I looked at Ruth. Ruth opened a second folder. Mrs. Brennan is the sole owner of BGM Holdings, LLC, which owns 73 commercial and residential properties across Connecticut, including this building. The sentence landed like a stone in still water. This building? Daniel repeated. The Winslow Country Club operates on a lease from BGM Holdings. Dorothy Brennan is your landlord. Ruth set down the property deed. Current portfolio valuation, $41 million. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The oil paintings stared down from the walls. The white tablecloths gleamed. Jessica's mouth opened and closed. Vivian sat back down heavily. Craig looked like he'd been hit in the chest. Daniel stared at me. Mom, $41 million? You press shirts. I do. And I invest. I've been buying properties since you were 7 years old. Every dollar I earned that I didn't need for rent or food, I put into real estate. Duplexes, strip malls, apartment buildings. I managed them, maintained them, grew the portfolio. 33 years. Why? His voice broke. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to see who you'd become without my money influencing you. I wanted to know if you'd value your mother for who she was, not what she had. The question hung in the air. Daniel looked at the table. And what did you find out? He asked quietly. I found out you let your wife hand back a quilt your mother made for your son. I found out you didn't say a word when her family called me a dry cleaner like it was a disease. I found out you married into a family that was stealing from retirees and never asked a single question about where the money came from. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. But I also found out, I continued, that you're not a criminal. You're careless, you're weak, but you're not dishonest, and that means there's something to work with. Claire Dawson stepped forward. Mr. Alderman, I'll need you to come with me. Craig stood mechanically. Monica was sobbing. Vivian hadn't moved. Jessica stared at the property deed on the table like it was written in a language she'd never learned. As Claire led Craig toward the door, he turned back. Dorothy, you've destroyed my family. No, Craig, you did that yourself. I just turned on the lights. After they left, the dining room felt enormous. Ruth and Angela stepped out quietly, giving us space. It was just me, Daniel, Jessica, and Vivian. 4 people and the truth. Daniel spoke first. I'm so sorry, Mom. His voice was raw. The christening, the quilt, all of it. I'm sorry. I know. I should have said something. When Jessica handed back the quilt, I should have. Yes, you should have. Jessica hadn't moved. Her cream dress looked wrong now, too polished for the moment, like a costume from a play that had ended. I didn't know about Craig, she said finally. Her voice was small. I swear I didn't know. Maybe not. But you knew the lifestyle didn't match the income. You knew and you didn't ask because the answer might have been uncomfortable. She didn't argue. Vivian stood up, gathered her purse, and walked toward the door without a word. Her heels clicked on the hardwood, slower than when she'd arrived. I reached under my chair and pulled out the box I'd brought. The quilt. I unfolded it and spread it across the table, over the property deeds and the bank statements and the evidence of a family coming apart. Blues and whites and soft yellows, stars and moons and little bears, Oliver, stitched in the center. This is for my grandson, I said. Not for your house, not for your standards, for him. Because his grandmother made it with her hands, and that means something. Daniel reached out and touched the fabric. His fingers traced the embroidery. His son's name, sewn by his mother, the woman who pressed shirts and built an empire and never told a soul. It's beautiful, Mom. I know. 6 months later, the strip mall on Barker Road was fully renovated. 22 units, affordable commercial space for small businesses, a bakery run by a Guatemalan family, a tutoring center started by a retired math teacher, a barber shop, a tax preparer, a small tailor shop where a woman named Carmen altered wedding dresses and prom gowns for half the price of the places downtown. I owned the building. I'd bought it in 2003 for $90,000. Current value, $2.8 million. But the value that mattered was the 22 families who could afford to run their businesses there because I kept the rent fair. Daniel was there on opening day. Not in a blazer, in work boots. He'd quit pharmaceutical sales 3 months ago and asked to learn the property management side of my business. Ruth had been training him. Tenant relations, maintenance schedules, lease negotiations, the boring, unglamorous work that kept buildings standing and families housed. He was terrible at first, couldn't fix a leaking faucet, didn't know the difference between a load-bearing wall and a partition, showed up late twice in the first week, but he kept showing up. Mom, he said, standing next to me as tenants carried boxes into their new spaces, I've been thinking about what you said, about work having dignity, and I think I finally get it. It's not about the job. It's about showing up, doing the work, even when nobody's watching, especially when nobody's watching. He was quiet for a moment. Jessica filed for divorce last month. I know, Ruth told me. She's keeping the house. I moved into an apartment in Norwalk. It's small. 1 bedroom. 1 bedroom is plenty. He looked at me. You've lived in a studio apartment for 16 years. You could live anywhere. I like my apartment. It reminds me where I started. Daniel watched a young couple carry a sign into their new bakery space. The sign read, Dulce Vita Bakery, handmade with love. Oliver's wearing the quilt, he said quietly. Every night. Jessica tried to put it away, but he cried until she brought it back. I didn't say anything. I just watched the bakery couple hang their sign, crooked at first, then straight, then perfect. Can you forgive me, Mom? I already have. Then why does it still feel like I'm catching up? Because forgiveness is a door. Walking through it is the easy part. What you build on the other side, that takes time. A woman in her 70s walked past us carrying a box labeled sewing supplies. She nodded at me. I nodded back. She was moving into the tailor shop, the last unit to be filled. Her name was Grace. She'd been a seamstress for 40 years and had lost her previous shop when the landlord tripled the rent. Daniel watched her go. You gave her the unit? I gave her a fair lease. She earned the space. That night, I went home to my studio apartment above Rosario's Pizza. The radiator clanked its familiar rhythm. The smell of tomato sauce drifted up through the floorboards. I opened the safe and looked at the 73 property deeds, the investment statements, the trust document I'd set up for Oliver. $2 million, waiting for him when he turned 25, but only if he'd held a job for at least 3 consecutive years. My phone rang. Daniel. Mom. I just wanted to say something. Go ahead. Thank you. Not for the money. Not for the properties. For showing me that a woman who presses shirts can build something that matters. I spent my whole life being embarrassed by what you did for a living. I didn't realize you were the strongest person I'd ever known. I looked at the quilt pattern I'd started that evening. A new one, for the next grandchild whenever that happened. Stars and moons and little bears. Daniel. Yeah? That quilt Jessica handed back at the christening. It took me 4 months to make. Every stitch was a prayer for Oliver. Every square was a piece of our family's history. Your grandmother's patterns. My hands. Your son's name. I know, Mom. It was never about the thread count or the brand. It was about love made visible. And when your wife held it like it was trash and you said nothing, that hurt more than anything Vivian or Craig or anyone has ever said to me. Silence on the other end. Then, very quietly, I know. And I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it. You don't have to make up for it. You have to learn from it. I'm trying. I can see that. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Mom. I hung up and looked around my apartment. $600 a month. A sewing machine in the corner. A safe full of property deeds, and a phone call from my son that meant more than all of it combined. Wealth isn't what people see. It's what you build when nobody's watching. For 33 years, I pressed shirts and bought buildings. I wore a name tag and signed property deeds. I was invisible and powerful at the same time. People looked at my hands and saw stains from the pressing machine. They didn't see the same hands signing contracts, negotiating leases, building affordable spaces for families who needed them. My daughter-in-law handed back a quilt because it was homemade. She didn't understand that homemade is the most expensive thing in the world. It costs time. It costs attention. It costs love. And to you, listening to this story, remember this. God didn't give us work as a punishment. He gave it as a purpose. Every shirt I pressed, every seam I stitched, every building I bought with money nobody knew I had, it was all preparation. Preparation for the moment when my family needed the truth more than they needed comfort. If someone has ever looked down on you for your job, for your clothes, for your address, let me tell you something. The people who judge you by your uniform have never built anything that lasts. The people who laugh at homemade gifts have never made something with their own hands, and the people who call you just a dry cleaner have no idea what you're pressing between those shirts. Purpose, patience, legacy. It was never about the quilt. It was never about the money. It was about showing up every single day and doing the work, even when nobody claps, even when nobody notices, even when your own family looks away. Because one day, they look back. And when they do, they finally see you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their work matters. Subscribe to this channel for more stories about real people making extraordinary choices. And if this story touched you, drop a comment. Tell me, have you ever been underestimated? I'd love to hear your story. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Your time is valuable, and I'm honored you spent it here. Some details in this story are fictionalized for storytelling purposes. If this type of content isn't for you, no worries. Explore other videos that suit your taste. There's something here for everyone. God bless you. And remember, it was never just a quilt. It was everything.